Welcome back to the Photo Banter podcast. I'm your host, Alex Gagne, and on today's podcast, I speak with photographer Pete Thompson. Pete just released a new book titled 93 Till, A Photographic Journey Through Skateboarding in the 1990s, which documents some of the most legendary skateboarders such as Tony Hawk, Neil Blender, Tom Penny, Danny Way, and Arto Sarri, to name a few. Pete spent much of the 1990s and early 2000s working as a staff photographer for skateboard magazines such as SLAP and Transworld Skateboarding. In this interview, I speak to Pete about how he got into photography, his experiences traveling the world, documenting some of the best skateboarders on the planet. And I also speak to Pete about his process of publishing his new book. Pete is someone whose work I've been looking up to since I was a kid, looking at the pages of Transworld Skateboarding. So I was really excited to get a chance to speak with him and kind of hear about his journey with photography, and as well as his new book, 93 Till, which I highly recommend picking up. I'll put a link in the description. Really amazing photography and stories, just kind of about his travels and different legendary skateboarders. Is a really amazing stuff. So I hope you guys enjoy this one, and thanks so much for listening. All right. Well, now welcome on Pete Thompson, man. How we doing, Pete? Really excited to talk to you, man. Like, your new book came out, 93 Till, right here. Highly recommend it for anybody. But how you doing, man?
I'm good, man. I'm good. Just, daylight savings is a little weird, but
Yeah, it is weird. It's like 7:30 right here on the East Coast, and I feel like it's midnight right now.
yeah, right. Like it's like, is it last call right now?
Yeah, pretty much. But yeah, man, I guess I was excited to talk to you. We've kind of been going back and forth with your new book that came out, and I really enjoyed it. I guess, like, what was kind of the journey of kind of putting this together? I guess, like, is it something you'd been thinking about working on for a while, this kind of putting this book together, or what was kind of the process for you?
Yeah, I mean, it was way, honestly, it's like way more time and way more money than I ever thought it would have ended up being.
Oh yeah.
It was just like, uh, a huge learning curve, just because there's so much stuff that I didn't know about making books, stuff that like most people just you wouldn't know unless you've been through it before.
Yeah.
um, but the first thing that you have to do is you have to figure out where all your photos are, and it's not always that easy.
Yeah, that was the most amazing thing, because, like, I grew up looking at your work and different skate mags and whatnot, and I obviously knew you photographed so many skaters. But even myself, when I got this book, it was just incredible just to see how many different skaters from different parts of the country, the world, that you kind of documented. Like, when you were even putting this together, was it kind of a interesting journey, kind of going back and kind of looking at your past and all your photography? Because some of the stuff, like some of your early photos, are from like 1988 and like super early 90s, so it's like incredible glimpse into skateboarding.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of that is, there was definitely the intention of having as many different people in the book as possible.
Yep.
I didn't have photos of like, Costin or something like that, like
Yep.
skating or anything, So it was like, okay, I don't have photos of him skating. He's a huge part of the '90s, but I had these other photos too, which actually ended up working out almost better for the direction that I wanted to take it.
Yeah.
I didn't want it to be a bunch of skate photos, just
Yeah,
because
that's yeah, the photos I really responded to the most was like you're like all the skaters in at Pulaski Park, like in DC, and it's just like all these kids that are probably like, I don't know how old you guys were at that point, probably like teenagers, early 20s maybe, and it was just kind of the group photos, and it wasn't even skating, it was just kind of this the whole culture and this kind of the scene pretty much.
yeah, I mean, that was an important part of it, just to have, um, as many. Uh, there we go. It's a little better.
You're good.
Just to have as many of those photos as I could, um, uh, but also just to show, like, different portions of my journey as a photographer. And it's also, I mean, I feel like with skate photos, it's really hard to understand how good a skate photo is, um, you know 5 years, 10 years, 15 years after it was taken,
Yeah.
because kids look at it and they're like, oh, well, I don't, whatever, I could have done that, or you know, that spot is blown up. Like if you shot something on the Hollywood 16, you know, back then it's like, compared to what's happened on it now, we'd be like, well, why are we even looking at
Yeah.
this picture? Like,
Yeah.
why did this?
I saw some kid last week switch front blunt slid
I
the
saw that.
Hollywood 16. I was like, Jesus Christ.
I saw that. I was like, yeah, dude, what's it like being from another planet?
Pretty
No,
much, man. And I
but
guess like being that you had so many photos to go through, like what was kind of your editing process of like putting this together? Like you kind of touched on a little bit, but like what was kind of your goal of like, because like editing your photos, like when you're going through this mini and putting it in a book is like a tough process, I would imagine, because you want it to be like a cohesive body of work. And I guess what was kind of your editing process of putting it together?
you know, it was honestly like a lot of it was just like what was important to me personally,
Yeah.
you know, and I knew, I mean, I feel like stepping away from skateboarding for 15 years gave me the ability to be like, oh, okay, I know what the story I want to tell. And that story isn't necessarily sort of rooted in skateboarding.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I wanted to tell a story about, you know, who these guys were and, you know, the contributions that they made to skateboarding, not necessarily the skateboarding itself.
Yep.
So, you know, having a picture of like, you know, a Jai Bondurov or a portrait of Dustin Dolan or something like that. Like, you know, you're never going to show kids how important these skateboarders are with skate shots.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's certain photos that you maybe can do that with, but for the most part, you know, you're not gonna, you know, you're not gonna be like, this is why Dustin Dolan mattered, and here he is doing a trick that any sort of sponsored amateur kid could do now. It's
Yep.
hard to make people see that.
And I think
So
it's interesting. I'm sure like some younger kids are definitely going to pick this book up, and I'm sure like a younger kid who's skating now, he might not know who Phil Shao is, but he got to like there's like a really great quote, and someone was talking about him. I don't know if it was you wrote it or something, but it's just kind of interesting. Like people from all ages and generations of skateboarding, they can kind of look at this, and it's like you can learn about who came before and who before like Nija and all these guys are around now. So it's kind of it's like an interesting thing. I guess anybody can kind of look at it, I guess.
yeah, I mean, it's you know, the Phil Shao thing was interesting, uh, you know, because and interesting and relevant because the way that he skated was so similar to the way that people set out to skate today,
Mm-hmm.
of being the, you know, ATV all-terrain guy, and it wasn't necessarily cool back then to be that guy.
Yeah.
um, and so I think that, you know, setting aside space in the book for people like that was my way of saying, like, you know what, you got to give these guys credit. Like, they were doing something that wasn't cool,
Mm-hmm.
and if you had the confidence and the wherewithal to sort of see that style of skateboarding being important back then, and then to actually go out and try to do that, like, is it's hard going against the grain. It was even harder going against the grain in 94, 95.
Yeah, because like that was the interesting thing about your book is you shot a lot of vert skaters and a lot of street skaters, and it's like, do you feel like because you came a little bit before my generation? I started skating in like '96, but really didn't start to learn about like everything, the whole culture of it until probably like '99, 2000 when I was a little older. But like so like in the early 2000s or early '90s, like you said, it was this kind of you're either kind of a ramp skater or kind of street skater. It's kind of two different groups pretty much.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Yeah.
and I think that was because I think the reason for that was because that street skating was still trying to figure out what it was.
Yeah.
You know, so it was almost like a you know, it was almost like specialized. Street skating was specialized
Yeah.
because it was so experimental, and so like, you know, what do you do with a pole that's been bent over? Oh, it's a pole wally thing. You know what I mean? Like, all of those things had to be invented,
Mm-hmm.
and in order to do that, I think that it required skateboarding to sort of you know, compartmentalize. You guys are street skaters. You guys are vert skaters. And then every once in a while, there'd be someone that kind of like danced around between those things. And if you did that well and you looked good, you didn't look like a street skater skating vert. You didn't look like a vert skater skating street. I feel like those guys, um, that sort of became like the template for guys like Raven Terche or Grant Taylor.
Yep.
Some of those guys that were just like, I'm just gonna rip everything and make it all look good. Which was tough. It was tough.
Yeah. I guess for you, like, what came first? Was it skateboarding and then photography, or how did that kind of come about for you?
It was skateboarding first.
Yeah.
Yeah, like it was like skateboarding was just like it was something that I really liked the fact that it didn't matter how good you were.
Yep.
It didn't matter what other kids thought, or it was just like it was just a rebellious thing. So it's like you had like the punk rock dudes and the heavy metal dudes and Hesh dudes and all that other stuff, and the skateboarders were sort of like peppered in with all those guys.
Yeah.
Because the attitude that they had about the world was so similar.
Yep.
And so definitely skateboarding first, and then I was sponsored. I was like a mini ramp. I skated a little bit of vert, a little bit of street. I just love skating mini ramp too, but that was the main thing. And then pretty much figured out kind of quickly that I wasn't going to cut it. So, and just started to shoot photos. But because I was a skateboarder who had traveled around the East Coast a lot to NSA, ESA contests or whatever, I had made friends with a lot of these guys. I skated against like Mike Frazier and
wow,
Hendrix and all these guys, and I remember meeting Ted Newsom, who became the art director at Transworld, at a contest in Daytona, Florida, and like everybody in the East Coast at that time knew each other.
Yep.
Because if it was cold up north, they would come down south.
Yep.
And then in the summertime, the guys down south, when it was really hot, would try to go somewhere where it wasn't. And so it's definitely like people in Boston knew people in DC. People in DC knew people in Tampa. Like everyone knew everyone. And so going from skateboarding to skateboard photography, I'd already sort of like kind of forged those paths in some ways.
Yeah.
So I could call people up and be like, hey dude, like we're gonna come skate and I want to take some photos too. And they were like, yeah, sure, so
yeah, because looking at the book, like it seems like you got roots in like North Carolina, and then there's some stuff in like Northern California. Like, where did you grow up and kind of initially get into skateboarding and photography, I guess?
Well, when I lived in Northern California is when I started skateboarding in Northern California when I was like 10.
Yeah.
And that was like, I remember buying, I don't know if I bought my first board, but I remember going to Sessions Skate Shop in Sunnyvale.
Yeah.
And like getting on the bus and riding there. I was like 10. It was like an hour away and I was like 10. 11-year-old kid getting on the bus.
Yeah.
Sessions. But we go, me and a couple friends, we would go there. That's where we get boards, or Palo Alto Skate Shop. And, that went on until I turned 12 or 13. And then my family moved to North Carolina.
Okay.
So I think that kind of, I've thought a lot about this since the book has come out and had a lot of conversations about this with people, but I think the difference maker with East Coast skateboarders at that time was some kind of connection to California. I talked to Andy Howell about this a lot, and he somehow convinced his parents to like fly him to California or something when he was like 14 or some crazy age or whatever.
Yeah.
And he hung out with Gons.
Wow.
like went street skating with Gons and like Ed Templeton and stuff. I think Gons, definitely Gons. I think Ed Templeton maybe, but that alone puts you in a mindset of, oh, this is possible.
Yeah.
Like I can go to California and I can do what these guys in California are doing. But if you lived on the East Coast and you didn't have any of that, it was really hard to imagine your skate world coming in contact with the world that you looked at when you opened a magazine.
Yeah, because all the magazines were in California, like either it was Thrasher and Slap were in like Northern California, and then Transworld was like in like San Diego, I think. So it was,
Yeah.
it was like all the mags were on the in California pretty much.
Yeah, and in order to like break that like invisible barrier, I remember talking to Jamie Thomas about this. He said that he saw what Markovich did,
Mm-hmm.
and Markovich had like this crazy support from his family. They like, I think they packed up their entire lives and moved out to California once Chris was like starting to like, you know, blow up.
Yeah.
But you know, you had to get out there. You had to get to California.
Yeah.
You had to see that this thing that you did in your hometown and in wherever, Georgia or something, with 8 or 10 other kids in a dirty parking lot. You had to see that what you were doing in your hometown
Mm-hmm.
translated to the bigger picture in California. And if you had that connection like I did, like I was super lucky that I lived in California and I skated for a couple years and then moved to the East Coast, because I was like, my mindset was still in
California kind of.
California mode.
Yeah,
Yeah,
because you had
exactly.
some like awesome. You went to like some YMCA skate camp and had like photos of like Danny Way and
Yeah,
Neil Blender,
yeah,
and I thought it was great. The one of my favorite things, you took a picture of the actual point and shoot camera. I think it was like a Konica little
yeah,
35 millimeter point and shoot, and it was this like, yeah, some of your early photos is from like that like camp. I guess it was pretty cool.
yeah. I mean, that was after I moved to North Carolina
Mm-hmm.
when I was like 13 or 14. My parents sent me to skate camp, which was in Santa Clara,
Wow.
which was, you know, 30 minutes from where I grew up.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, I'm back here in Northern California again. So the thing that that people have to understand about those skate camps back then is that the idea of having somewhere to skate with ramps and
Yeah.
pros that you could watch was like some kids at camp didn't even skate. They
Really?
just sat and watched.
Oh wow, it was just
They
like
were,
their parents just dropped them off for the week or something, pretty much.
yeah, or they flew them there. I mean, I got flown there.
Yeah.
You know, my parents were, my parents, you know, in terms of like my childhood and the beginning of photography, my parents were really into experiences.
Okay.
They wanted me and my brother to like go places and do things rather than, oh, here's a,
Here's the new
here's the video, here's the
Nintendo.
video game, the Nintendo thing you wanted or
Yeah.
whatever. They were like, nah, we'll pay for shit, but it's got to be like, an experience based type thing.
Yeah.
So they sent me to camp, and that's where I met a bunch of people, but most importantly, Jake Rosenberg.
Wow.
We were
But
both campers.
oh, he was a camper too?
Yeah, we were both campers. He is from Los Altos, so for him, camp was 20 minutes away.
Damn.
But he had mutual friends of mine that I grew up with in Palo Alto. So it was like, oh, you're Jake Rosenberg. You're the guy that, some of my friends that I used to skate with when I lived in Northern California before I moved to North Carolina. But the funny part about Jake is that me and him and like maybe 2 or 3 other people were the only kids at camp that wanted to skate vert.
Interesting.
All the other campers went and skated the street course, which was where Matt Hensley, Brian Lottie, Ezekiel, like, who else? Ray Barbie was there.
Wow.
Like, yeah, like everybody was there, and that's where they all hung out at mostly, is the street course. So me and Jake, we skated the small vert ramp, which was like 9 feet tall, and then the big ramp, which was like 12 feet tall. And all of the vert dudes that were skating with us weren't campers. They were just pros who had heard about skate camp
and wanted to skate there.
and literally drove from wherever they were
Yeah.
to go to just barge on this skate camp. And I remember
because
there.
yeah,
What's that?
yeah, because you mentioned in your book how like back then, like even me, like growing up, like there wasn't like they just built a skate park in Boston like 4 years ago. They got their first park really, and it's like you said back then, there wasn't skate parks like the way there is now. Like you can literally go anywhere in the country and there's like best skate parks that are built by like amazing companies, and it's amazing.
Totally.
But back then, I love the pictures because they're just like these shitty like plywood ramps, like no masonite, no skate light didn't even exist back then. It's just like real rugged. Like the vert ramps were like not wide at all. So
totally.
Yeah.
I mean, it was like, but that was what's so amazing about skateboarding back then, is that, okay, let's just go ahead and say the shoes sucked, the board sucked. Like indie trucks were great.
Yeah.
That was cool. That's still pretty standard.
Yep.
The spots sucked. Like the fact that anything got done back then is pretty amazing.
Yeah, you really had to love it.
Yeah, you really had to love it, and you really had to be patient in terms of discovering what skateboarding was. A friend of mine, I think it was Elias Bingham, who runs No Comply. We were talking, I don't know, a couple months ago, and we sort of came up with this like analogy for skateboarding back then, which was like somebody hands you a tennis racket and tells you to go to the North Pole and learn how to play tennis.
Yeah.
And every time you go and you find like something like some kind of flat area, they tell you to leave. And the only thing that you have to play with is this tennis racket and like a snowball or something.
Yeah, man.
You know what I mean? Like, what am I doing with this? Like, I don't even know what this is. Like, what, that kind of, it just felt like that. It just felt like, and it felt like in order to discover and do new things on a skateboard, you had to be really, really, like you said, you had to be really dedicated, and you had to be really, like, just relentless and diehard and creative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I feel like being a skateboarder, and at least for me, like once I found, like when I first started off, and you find like a couple friends that also skate and like have a tight skate crew, that just like even excels it even more, because it's like you kind of feed off the other people doing it. Like, do you kind of remember, like, did you kind of have like a little skate crew like growing up, or you kind of just doing it yourself pretty much?
Well, I had a little skate crews growing up and stuff, and Northern California versus North Carolina. In Northern California, you had people to watch that were like pro. Like Caballero lived in San Jose.
Damn.
Tommy Guerrero lived in the city. Like, those guys were close, and the videos were out as well. So we sort of looked up to that.
Yep.
But then in North Carolina, it was like whatever was in a video or a magazine was on another planet.
Yeah.
Like that was another whole, like, you couldn't wrap your mind around it,
Yeah, for sure.
It just seemed like this thing that was happening in sunny, beautiful California.
Yeah, man. I remember, I was the same way. Growing up in Massachusetts, it was like the same thing. I was just like, you look at Transworld every month as a subscription, and you see all these like the Carlsbad Gap and all these famous spots, and it's just like, it's just like another world. But it's
totally.
But I guess like when you're kind of in North Carolina and skating out there, like was there a point when you kind of started to take your photography more seriously? Because I know you ended up going to work for like SLAP and I think Transworld at one point. But when did kind of photography kind of take over for you, I guess?
Honestly, it was around the time that like I was figuring out that me being a skateboarder just wasn't gonna work.
Yep.
There's way more kids. There's way more people that were better than me around, and this ain't gonna work.
Yeah, you gotta be
Like,
really good.
yeah, and crazy, and just a totally different breed of person. I think was made a great skateboarder back then. But um, uh, I was at a street contest in North Carolina, and all of these guys from DC showed up. I remember it was like Steve Teague, who was like a big DC, one of the main DC guys at the time. And I knew who he was. And I think there was a couple other people there, maybe from New York or Philly. But I met Lance Dawes. And I wasn't, I mean, I was sort of kind of taking photos here and there with a point and shoot camera or crappy SLR camera. But I remember talking to him, and I think he said, "Hey, I'm either going to California, or I'm getting ready to, or I'm living there now, or whatever, and I'm doing this magazine out of San Francisco." I don't know if he even said it was part of Thrasher.
Yeah.
He's like, "Yeah, so if you want to send me some photos," and I was like, yeah, of course, and to me, honestly, the way that skateboarding looks today, a big part of that is Lance Dawes.
How so? Just with like SLAP and everything, just kind of the creativity behind it.
So you take SLAP, which was this sort of groundbreaking concept of, oh, we're going to cover what's happening in San Francisco in street skating, which Thrasher actually resisted for a while.
Yeah.
For a while, Thrasher was like, who are these kids down at Embarcadero and flipping their boards everywhere and they look goofy? Like, I think Thrasher sort of like shunned them off a little bit at first, just from what I understand.
Yeah.
But Lance embraced those guys. And then he also embraced all of the culture of East Coast skateboarding, because he's from Silver Springs. Yeah, he's from DC area.
Yeah.
So when he took those two things, the neglected street skating in San Francisco, the neglected street skating in the East Coast, and he put them together and, peppered in the hip hop culture, punk rock culture, and just this rawness, I think it was exactly what skateboarding needed at that moment. Wow. And I think that it made the other magazines, it lit a fire under the ass of the other magazines. I think. You ask Lance, he's probably like, he's like, he's like the reluctant dude who's not going to take any credit for stuff. But I know I'm giving you credit, Lance.
Yeah, that's one thing, because because even back then, like growing up, like when I was early 2000s, late 90s skating, like the only times you'd ever see like a lot of East Coast photos was like if they did like an East Coast issue, or maybe like some East Coast article, and it was still this very California driven, which I get because all the companies were there. But yeah, SLAP more than anything, like you would see a lot more New York and some Philly stuff, and like it was just a mix of people,
Yeah, and the other thing that I think that, and I saw Lance last week actually. Look, I told Lance this. I was like, dude, your contribution to skateboarding in that way, obviously shaped the way that we look at skateboarding. But also from the standpoint of like, he had to do an entire magazine more or less by himself.
Yeah.
I mean, he had help from like Cossack.
Yep.
And a couple other guys that were sending him photos, but like by and large, like he had to come up with a shit ton of content.
Yeah, because he at that point was he shooting photos himself at that point as well as run the magazine that's doing everything. Yeah.
Oh God, I don't even know how he did it. It's like wow. But and he had like 2 or 3 people helping him. Jamie Riley, I don't know if Wayne was there yet, who went on to I think work for DC or something. But like, it's like, the amount of images that he must have shot is, I'm sure is like just stunning,
Yeah. So at
But I
that,
mean, honestly, like, but you think about it, like, when you take Thrasher and Transworld, um, and you think about the way that they saw skateboarding in 1992 or
Mhm.
1990, 1991, it's kind of like business as usual. They've been doing it for a long time. The vert skaters rule, and like,
they had a
you know,
formula.
yeah, it was a formula, and they knew, okay, contests matter, and we're gonna go cover this skate contest in Tempe, Arizona, and it's like Chris Miller and Hosoi and Gator and all these guys. It's like felt like it was like business as usual. And
Yeah.
honestly, I'll say it again. I think Lance and the whole idea of SLAP really just slap
Yeah.
everybody across the face. It's
Yeah.
like, we're here.
Yeah, where they're skating, doing their thing. Yeah, because I
Yeah.
remember growing up and reading about like, because in California they had this thing called like castle contests, which
Yeah.
was like a
Yeah.
contest circuit. And for me back then, I was like, what the fuck is that? Because I was like, on the East Coast, they didn't have anything like that. There was no like skateboard contest league, and it was just very interesting. I remember, yeah, like the contest thing didn't really exist except for like occasionally like the local skate park would have like a contest, and it was just basically just kind of run by whoever owned the park or something like that. And it was just
Yeah.
a whole different kind of ecosystem, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it contests mattered.
Yep.
And I think that along with Lance and Slap came the technology of being able to put, a camera into a kid's hands and be like, show us your scene.
Yeah.
It democratized skate media.
Yeah.
Like, here we go. For every 4 or 5 dudes that come out of a scene, there's a filmer and hopefully a photographer.
Yeah,
And
definitely.
that changed things as well, definitely, on top of Lance sort of shining a light on urban street kids,
Yeah.
street skating.
Cause like at that point when Lance is starting to slap and you're kind of helping, were you basically just kind of contributing, or you're kind of like on the staff at that point, and like who were you kind of shooting and what were you kind of submitting, I guess, to the early days of slap?
I mean, honestly, like a lot of that time I spent trying to learn how to shoot photos.
Yep.
Very experimental. There's a lot of stuff that I shot during that period of time that looked like shit, to be honest.
Yeah.
But I think that I was shooting a lot with the DC guys. I was doing traveling up to like Philly and stuff like that. But the slap years didn't last that long. It was like 2.5 years for me.
Okay.
And then I started working for Transworld.
So what was like those early days, like you said, with slapping, you're like just kind of driving around shooting your NC guys and driving up to DC. Was this kind of like, was Lance kind of giving you ideas like, hey, go shoot these guys? Or was it just purely like what you wanted to shoot and you were just kind of doing your thing pretty much?
I mean, it was Lance helping out in that way. He definitely helped out in like he knew all the guys in DC, and he sort of spearheaded that. He'd call up Andy Stone and be like, hey, this guy's gonna come shoot photos, and it's like that kind of direction. But also I just wanted to shoot photo. I just wanted to travel as much as possible and shoot photos as much as possible, and just like experiment, like that was just super fun.
Yeah, because I was looking at the book, like the 94 and 95, like you were all over the fucking place because like all the photos, you're like, I was like, damn, where the fuck this guy? You literally were traveling all the time because it'd be like Philly, DC, North Carolina, San Francisco, and it's like all over the place. And like, I guess in those early days of photography, like, how are you kind of learning the craft? Was anybody kind of helping you along? Did you take any classes, or is this really this kind of trial and error for you?
It was trial and error.
Yeah.
I mean, I had a hard time with focus.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, this is pre autofocus days. This is this.
No. There was autofocus.
Oh, was there? Yeah.
Yeah, but like there's something about shooting skate photos where you're shooting a moving object,
Mm-hmm.
and you're not gonna track them.
Yep.
You can probably track them now with the technology, but you couldn't track them then.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to start to understand what depth of field was and how much flexibility that would give you. Um, and just like starting to look at photos through a loop. Uh, and when you don't have a trained eye for looking at transparencies
Mm-hmm.
through a loop, things look like they're in focus. Oh yeah, that's sharp.
Yep.
And I remember going into uh, I think I was in SLAP. I only went to SLAP like 2 or 3 times.
Yep.
And I remember that maybe once like Lance being like, "Come here and look at this picture," and I looked at it and it was just like just razor sharp.
Yeah.
And he's like, "That's a sharp photo.
Wow.
That's what a sharp photo looks like." And I was like,
eye opening. Now you knew
yeah,
you needed, that's what you needed to go after pretty much.
But not only is it like you're training yourself to shoot photos, but you're also training yourself to look at photos
Mm-hmm.
and be like, this is sharp. This is a good photo. This is printable.
Yep.
And so, learning all that stuff with film was insane.
Yep.
Maybe you're shooting something now and you have digital and it's not sharp. You're like, oh, it's not sharp.
Just crank up that
And
sharp.
then the next try you refocus.
Yeah.
Whereas there it was like you go through the entire trick and not have a single photo in focus.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's got expensive, like with film and processing and everything. And it was a lot slower process back then. And it was just a lot more to it than like like you said, now you can buy a little memory card and shoot like 2,000 photos on it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's and there's also like a distance that you go when you shoot film where you shoot it. And then after a couple of days, you may have sort of, loosened your grip on what you were going for in the picture mentally.
Yep.
So that when you sit down and you look at it on the light table, it's not an instant expectation.
Yeah.
You start to see other things in the picture that you're like, oh, this isn't really what I wanted to do with the picture, but I do like this over here. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you do that on the spot, you're more likely to be like, no, I'm going to tweak all the buttons until I get exactly what I want.
Yep.
Which is good too, but seeing the having distance from it really helps expand your idea of what's possible, what's relevant in the frame.
Mm-hmm. I feel like that like never changes, even with my own work. Like I've been talking to my friends about this. It's just like it's a constant evolution. Like the work I looked at that I shot like 2 years ago is like completely different to what I do now. And it's just like, do you feel now, like I know you do a lot of really cool like commercial and lifestyle work now. Do you feel like your work is still a constant evolution of this kind of chipping away at it, trying new stuff? Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, it's like, you could have a certain idea of what you wanted to do with something. And I think there's a certain point that you reach in your career, if you're a photographer, where you get it to a boiling point,
mm-hmm.
and then you almost start to intentionally make mistakes.
Interesting.
Or leave enough space over here for mistakes to happen.
Yeah.
Like sometimes if you have motion blur in a photo, it can actually look really great. Sometimes it has this like romantic, just a little bit.
Yeah.
Little bit of motion blur. It just gives it this like romantic kind of feel to it sometimes. If it's a portrait, I think.
Yeah.
Or go ahead.
No, it's an interesting point. I think like, because the longer you do it, at least for me, the longer I do it, you got your bag of tricks. Like you go into whatever shoot you're doing, whatever it's like an editorial shoot or commercial, and like you got these certain bag of tricks and they're gonna work every time. But then something I've been trying to do myself is just like, try something different. Like Like I've been fucking around with some different lights just to mix it up instead of kind of getting stuck doing the same thing over and over, you know?
Yeah, I mean, you can do so much with photography, and I think that that's part of that process that I'm talking about, reaching that tipping point
Yep.
where you've learned how to use the tools so well that you can start to let one of those tools uh, sort of, you can let one of those tools go
Mm-hmm.
and see what happens.
Definitely. That's what keeps
Like,
it.
because if you know how to like reel it back in and get to where you want to be, where you feel safe,
Mm-hmm.
then that feels, you feel comfortable making mistakes because you're like, oh, I'm going to let this be fucked up for a
Yep.
couple frames because I know how to take it and bring it back where it needs to be, where I'm safe and I'm going to get what I usually get. But
Yeah.
you have to know all those tools in order to be able to experiment that way. Otherwise, you're just like a chef in the kitchen, just pouring
Yeah.
everything in the pot, and you're like, I hope it tastes good, you know? Like,
Yeah, yeah, for sure. That's how I felt like when got into shooting skating a little bit, or when I was younger, is I had those old quantum like not pocket wizards, but they were the old quantum ones that had like an antenna, and
oh
they were
yeah,
like
yeah,
a huge
radio
thing.
slaves.
Yeah, radio saves. They were the
Yeah,
quantum ones. They were huge, had
yeah,
an antenna, and I
yeah.
had two flashes, and I didn't understand shit about flashes, and I must have shot like 10, 20 rolls before I started like understand like flash duration and all this stuff, and it's just like trial and error, and it's like
Oh,
yeah, it's tough.
oh,
And that was on film too, so it's like
yeah.
a lot of garbage.
Wow. Yeah, it's almost like, funny when I think about the book and I think about the photos. The photos that I tried to stay away from were fisheye photos for the
Hmm.
most part, uh, and photos with flashes.
Yeah.
I just, the way I see photography now is just like, if you can get natural light, or what I do a lot in my work now is try to create light that is fake
Mm, yep.
but looks natural,
Yep.
which is a crazy learning curve,
Yeah.
which never changes. Like, you'll always look at your photography and be like, how can I make this light look natural when it's not?
Totally.
But that was part of the book, is like, I just really wish that I would have turned off more flashes and
Yep.
shot daylight, just straight daylight
Well, there
more.
was like in the early 2000s when everyone switched over to shooting Hasselblads with fish eyes. It was like I feel like looking at the work, it was almost a contest to see how many flashes you could use on a picture at some points. There was
Yeah. Well, but also, the point behind that also is that if you had more flashes, that showed that you had more time
true.
and that you didn't get busted.
Yeah.
It's like there's some great photos out there from all eras of skateboarding
Hmm.
where it's like you might have had 3 tries,
Yep.
and then you got kicked out. And
Yep.
so sometimes if it's a shitty quality photo, people are like, oh, okay, cool. That's all you're really gonna get. Don't have an opportunity to really elaborate on anything.
Yeah. Do you feel like your years of like being a skateboard photographer, and like you said, like, for people listening that maybe aren't skateboarders, a lot of times these photos where you're shooting someone street skating at some like private building or something, you get like 2 minutes sometimes, and you have to have your shit set up like I'm sure you've done this before, where you have to have your shit set up on stands around the corner. You run up, you
Yeah,
set it up, and you try to make it happen.
yeah,
Do you feel like those years of like skateboard photography is kind of shaped the way you approach even like commercial advertising and stuff you do
yeah,
now? Yeah.
totally.
Yeah.
Because it's all improvising.
Yeah.
Like it's like, oh, we need to get this picture. Okay, uh, you don't have time to run and get a C stand or a medium roller. I can't get
Yeah.
a boom arm or any kind of thing like that. Or, all right,
Yeah.
fine, grab this, do this, hang it off that tree, and then do this. Like, but that applies to basically any kind of photography, is being able to adapt. I mean,
Hmm.
the one thing that I remember doing when I was an assistant for this photographer for like 4 years was, um, we shot on location a lot, and we had a big grip truck,
Yep.
which is like a 15, 18-foot moving van looking
Yep.
thing. And usually the trucks were white. So if we didn't have time to set up a 12 by, a 12 by frame on stands, I would just be like, give me the keys to the truck. And then I would pull the truck up across the street or wherever we were
Yeah.
with the big white
It's a giant
side
bounce.
of the truck.
Yeah.
And be like, there's your bounce.
That's great, man. Yeah.
Or if it was windy and you couldn't put up a 12 by because it'd fly away.
For sure.
A 12 by being a 12 foot by 12 foot frame with silk or any kind of like fabric on it.
Yeah, it's a fusion.
Bounce light in from like across the, like if you're in the shade and you need to bounce light in, you put it way over here. And so you just use a truck.
Yeah. Yeah.
Move the grip truck.
Fuck it. Whatever you got to do, man. It's just, you make it work.
Yeah.
And one thing I really enjoyed about the book was you have a ton of amazing quotes from this like legendary skaters, everyone from like Tony Hawk to Keith Hufnagel, rest in peace, who just passed away, like Arto Sarri. I guess like what was the process of like putting that together? Did you kind of do interviews with each of these people, or like how did the quote aspect of the book come together for you?
I wanted to. I mean, the guys that I interviewed, were guys that I knew for the most part, and I knew what their story was, or at least sort of generally what their story was.
Yep.
But I thought, if I ask so and so about, the '90s, I know that this is a big part of their career, and they would have something to say about it, or. But honestly, it started off being something where I wanted to connect 90s skateboarding to current trends and current fashion and just the effect that skateboarding has had on culture.
Yep.
But that didn't really sort of like flesh out. What ended up happening is I talked to a lot of the people that were in the book. I talked to them, and they sort of told stories that were more personal.
Yeah, Arto's quote was gnarly. It was like, that one like caught me off guard. It's like, you basically talked about dealing with depression, and that's like how he approached like skating gnarly rails and shit, because he just was like, fuck it, like I might die. Like I was just like, damn, man.
And that was, I mean, I think that the him being candid about that, as well as Jamie Thomas or Guy Mariano or those guys, to me, that sort of became this sort of subplot of the book, to try to explain to people today who live in a much different world of skateboarding, I think, like what kind of a kid like got into skateboarding back then. And it was like, when you're doing something that's not accepted, and you're going to get laughed at, or you're going to get made fun of, or people just scratch their head, they don't know anything about it, it takes a certain type of kid to pursue that. And I think a lot of those interviews sort of demonstrate a type of kid who in a lot of ways is saved by skateboarding.
Definitely.
Like there's moms dropping their kids off at the skate park today. Being a skateboarder is cool. Like, to me, that's crazy. But like, I think that when you take the current state of affairs with that and you compare them with like, 93, 94, it's like you had to really want to be there.
Definitely.
You had to really have something burning inside of you to pursue this thing that didn't really have any meaning outside of this little tiny.
Yeah, because that's like, even like Tony Hawk, and he had a couple quotes in the book, but one was like, we were just like, I was living the dream, I wasn't making any money, and like that was like, it was crazy. And it's just like, like you said, he had to love it. And now it's just like interesting. Tony Hawk is one. I mean, it seems one of the photos you met him like when you're like a little kid somewhere or something.
That's crazy. That was in Palo Alto.
Yeah.
Yeah,
His career has been insane to watch. I mean, I've been
dude.
watching him on Instagram lately, and it's like he's just even getting better, and he's like 52, and
Yeah,
it's just crazy to watch, you know?
he is honestly like the dude is like you can't even describe it really. I mean, who has that kind of trajectory of 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 something that they're really really passionate about?
Yep.
You find people when they're young and they're passionate about it, and they really really try and they really just do whatever they can. And
Mhm.
at event sometimes they're successful, sometimes they're not, and
Yep.
eventually like reality starts to set in.
Yep.
And for him to have gone up and down and up and down and then up and up and up and up and up and up.
And
You really,
there was like a point in like the 90s, like when he started getting sponsored by like I think he was sponsored by like Slim Jim at one point, or no, like Bagel Bites and like these,
yeah,
and people clowned on him. Like I remember people like,
yeah,
oh, Tony Hawk, but now it's like he's come around, and now people are like, it seems like give him a lot more respect because it's like, I mean, that guy, it's insane,
yeah.
man. I've always been a
Where were
fan.
those? Where were those people when he was down here?
Yeah, yeah,
I mean, that's the crazy thing is like he was skateboarding when no one else was skating.
yeah,
Like the parks all closed down, and everybody was like, "All right, that's the end of that." And to demonstrate, just if this doesn't demonstrate the amount of passion that he has for skateboarding, I don't know what does. Simply the fact that when no one was doing it,
yeah.
he was figuring out a way to continue and just keep it alive.
Mm-hmm.
And he's just like, hey, it was fun.
Yeah,
And dude, if you want a compass in life, like for something that you believe in, whether it's cool or not, and having a guy like him to look at and be like, hey, dude, this is what I'm doing because I believe in it. I want to keep doing it.
yeah,
I'm having fun doing it, and fuck what you think, like
yeah.
that takes a lot of guts, you
That's
know.
like, yeah. Why do you? I've always wondered that. Like within skateboarding, there. I mean, there's just a lot of people that always like for years people clowned on like getting more of those like quote unquote like corporate sponsors. But then
Yeah,
something happened. Now it's like it's just normal. Like, oh, you skate for Monster, like that's cool. Like, but there was a while. Like, I mean, there's probably some people still shit on that for sure. But
yeah.
why do you think that is within skateboarding? It's just like I don't know.
Well, I think that it happened. Well, I mean, I don't know why it changed like that. I mean, the attitude changed towards it. But I think what really happened, honestly, is that the X Games came in and had the wherewithal to know that if we just stick with this long enough, eventually kids skating now won't know skateboarding without the X Games.
Yeah. And you shot the first one in Newport, Rhode Island. You got a picture in the book. I think Colin McKay
Oh no, that
and
wasn't the first one.
that wasn't okay.
I think if I dated the photo wrong in the book, I guess we
I just,
screwed up.
I probably just assumed because they were in Newport, Rhode Island, and I was just figured
Yeah.
that's the only reason that pro skateboarders would be in Newport, Rhode Island.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think it was the second year. I'm
Yeah.
almost sure I wasn't there the first year.
Yep.
First year I heard was really weird.
Oh, really?
People were just sort of like, "You don't get this? Like, there's like cameras, and we're supposed to like take our runs." I don't. That's what I heard. But I
Yeah.
remember the team meeting at the second X Games
Hmm.
when all of the pros got together with all of the like producers,
Yep.
and there was like, yeah, there was some static there.
Oh, I'm sure because the producers are coming at it from like shooting Monday Night Football last week, and then they're coming in thinking it's like,
Actually, they did have a lot of more patience
yeah,
than I would have imagined. But what the problem was that there was just still a barrier there of they just didn't get it.
yeah, it's like
But
another,
they weren't trying. I don't think they were trying to be dicks or anything. They just
yeah,
didn't get it. They just how could you? I mean, it took them another whatever decade or more, before you had this, Tony Hawk 900 moment and those types of things.
yeah,
Uh, they needed to step back, and I don't think that they realized how important stepping back was for
yep,
skateboarders at that time.
yep,
But I think that they were around long enough to sort of permeate the industry, the competitive industry of skateboarding, But what's also rad is that, street skating outside of that still existed and was still
Mm-hmm.
regarded as the purest form of skateboarding, which to do those two things at the same time is pretty amazing.
Yeah, no doubt. And looking at the book, you have a lot of amazing portraits. Was portrait photography something you were kind of always drawn to, and like, was there like any influences to that or anything? Or because there's even early on, there's like this amazing portraits of like Tom Boyle and like Danny Gonzalez and Bam Margera, and there's some really amazing portraits.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just goes back to me wanting to shoot photos all the time,
Mm-hmm.
just constantly, and just being like, "Ooh, what's this? Like this new toy, or try this umbrella out, or whatever." And I just wanted to keep experimenting. I don't think that I started. I think later on when I started to shoot more portraits, like around 2002,
Yep.
that was more of a reaction to um, getting kicked out of spots, you know, being around skateboarders that didn't skate necessarily
Yep.
as much as their people expected them to. So I
Mm-hmm.
was like, all right, cool, let's shoot a portrait.
Get something, do something with
Gotta
the
get
day.
something,
Yeah, gotta
you
get
know,
something.
like, but then portraits became like much more I don't know, it was sort of that was a weird evolutional.
Yeah.
It was a weird evolution, and
Yep.
I didn't know what was happening
Mm-hmm.
necessarily.
Yeah.
I just was shooting photos, So, um, you know, obviously, and a lot of this medium format, Hasselblad stuff like that. Um, but what's funny is actually a lot of skateboarders in the early '90s did not want their photo taken, their portrait taken.
Yeah.
It just wasn't cool.
Because it was like, oh, what am I, like a model? Like it's like
Yeah, they're
corny.
like,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
yo, man, like, but who wasn't like that, who you may have thought was Stevie.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
He didn't mind it.
I mean, he literally was like, I remember the photo on the cover of the book was shot at Wallenberg.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't really have a plan, I don't think, to do anything in particular that day.
Yeah.
And I think I might have just gotten the Hasselblad.
Oh wow.
And I was just like, he was sitting there just, rolling a joint. And I was like, hey, can I take some photos of you? And he was like, yeah, go ahead.
He's just like, yeah, whatever, do your thing,
But
man.
it was like a yeah, go ahead. Like,
Let's.
I'm gonna continue doing whatever the fuck I want to do,
Yep.
be me.
Yeah. He had confidence.
And if you, yeah,
Probably a lot of
exactly.
that because you think about even like I think like early on, like being a skateboarder, you're self-conscious as like a teenager, and
Mm-hmm.
you want to like fit in with the group, and I'm sure it's some of that, this being a
Yep.
young kid and stuff like that. Like even as a photographer yourself, like do you always have the confidence to like approach people, because you do need to have some type of confidence to be able to approach people to like make these photos happen, like reaching out to people, or like I don't know, were you always kind of confident, good with talking to people, I guess?
Uh, I don't. I mean, I've heard people say that I am. I don't really see it as much as maybe
They do.
somebody else might think that I am.
Hmm.
But I think, um, yeah, I mean, I think you do have to have something that disarms people a
Yep.
little bit. You're like, and I think the thing about shooting portraits of people is like, I want them to be who they are.
Yep.
And I think that a lot of people who are shy or don't want their portrait taken have this, some of them have an idea that you're going to come in there and be like, I want you to do this, and like,
Yeah. So I'm like,
lean
yeah.
over on the side, like, do some crazy look or something.
Yeah.
Um, and I've asked people to do certain things, but I think that wanting to show who people truly are is is more powerful than any of that. I think that reality is much more
Yeah.
interesting than fantasy. And
Yeah.
I think that skateboarders sort of are perfectly kind of you know, acclimated to that. Like authenticity in skateboarding is really important.
100%.
Yeah,
It's like the
totally.
most critical thing. They'll clown you on like what type of trucks you skate or like how
Yeah,
you dress and like the
yeah,
music you skate to, and it's like everything.
yeah,
It's very interesting.
yeah.
But
I think Stevie, um, coming from a place where he caught a lot of shit for being a skateboarder,
mm-hmm.
I think that kind of like hardened him up.
That chip on his shoulder, like fuck you, I'm gonna do my thing.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm gonna have the confidence to do what I believe in
Mm-hmm.
and follow the path that I want to
Yeah.
follow, and I'm not going to be concerned with what you think I should be doing.
Yeah.
Which when you circle back to that moment of shooting the photo on the cover,
Yeah.
that's exactly who he is on the cover. He is like, I don't even know if like I asked him to look up at the camera.
Yeah. He
Like
was,
he might have just done that on his own.
yeah.
But like the fact that I could take a photo of him that I like, I mean, I'm like, oh my god, how lucky am I to have this photo?
And
Uh,
and what's like been the response for like some of the people? I'm sure it's been amazing to like get to reconnect with some of these people. I would imagine like having, I'm sure some of you haven't talked to in years. Like, what's
yeah.
kind of been the response from some of the skaters that were kind of profiled in this book, I guess.
I mean, it's been pretty cool, like just catching up with people I haven't seen in 20 years.
Yeah.
You know, I didn't really even know Guy Mariano
Okay.
until I started working on the book, and I went and talked with him. We had like a 3.5 hour conversation, which
Wow.
sick conversation. Yeah, that
Yeah.
dude got some really amazing perspective on not just his career but just skateboarding generally, and like
Mhm.
you know um you know a life in skateboarding. But
Yeah.
a couple like a month ago I saw Jake Rupp for the first time, and
Wow. I
yeah,
love Jake Rob, man. This like the
such a good
style
dude.
that guy, dude, the best.
Such a good dude. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Jake guys like Jake Rupp, I remember seeing like Kevin Taylor and Kareem in Tampa. I saw a lot of people in Tampa right before COVID.
Mm.
Ron Allen, I saw him at Tampa. Like just crazy. And actually I had connected with Brian Lottie in Brooklyn when I was working on some of the text of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And he had some really great perspectives on how to, tell the story, and, how that era felt.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's really cool. It's like, the interesting part of meeting up with people that you haven't seen in a long time is the point that where they are along the journey of having been a pro skateboarder, no longer being a pro skateboarder,
Mm-hmm.
moving on to something else, still being in the industry, feelings attached to growth and evolving.
Mm-hmm.
And the guys that have the ability to articulate those things were amazing to talk to. I mean, talking to Jamie Thomas,
Yeah.
like again, another 3 hours of like, wow, like what
Yeah.
a
His,
crazy, amazing, like
yeah.
insane path.
Yeah, I think the quote, because I mean I grew up watching that dude forever, but I never would have thought like the quote in the book was like something to the effect of like when he got to SF, he was just trying so hard to fit in, and it was just like lost, and it was just like, and he said the reason why he worked so hard and why people call him the chief now was not so much that he was like trying to get after it so much. It was more like he said he was like insecure basically, and that's how he wanted to basically prove
Yeah,
himself. Yeah,
I think, and that's not just in skateboarding. I think that's in almost every
yeah,
walk of life or journey that people have, is they want to feel uh, they want to be recognized, and they want to feel like what they're doing matters,
Yep.
and they want to show a lot of the guys from that era who came from, you know, single parent households, or parents who are just out to lunch, not involved in their lives. I think there's a lot of that that um, ended up resulting in, um, you know, the sheer determination to be the the gnarliest, most, you know, respected skateboarder out there.
Yeah.
I think there's definitely a connection to those things. And it's not just in skateboarding. It's like, you look at basketball, you look at boxing, you look at, you know, almost any type of thing that people put their heart into when they're young. It's like, yeah, I want to go out there and prove that I have value, or I'm worth something.
Yeah, you're hungry.
Yeah, maybe you know, maybe you didn't get love from your dad, or you know, you get the approval from them, and now you're proving that you're, you know, that's I mean, that's, you know, that is something that is a common theme for a lot of people growing up. It's just that um, a lot of people end up self-destructing in other ways.
Definitely.
You know, alcohol or drugs or whatever. Skateboarders just happen to find skateboarding, and you know, I always think of it in terms of the kids who try skateboarding as the ones who try it, and the first time they hurt themselves,
they're done.
They're done. Yeah, they're done. They're like, they tweak their ankle and they're like, I'm not skateboarding anymore.
Yeah.
And I think there's like a lot, like a dividing line right there. There's those kids on this side of that line, and then there's the other kids on this side of that line that are like, oh, I don't have a problem with self-destruction at all.
I'm gonna skate this park. I'm gonna skate this park for 5 hours until 2 in the morning.
Just destroy yourself.
Yeah.
Like, you know, and the more self-destructive you are, the more people sort of like stand back and awe, like, assuming that you're rolling away from the tricks. But,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
But, yeah, for sure. A couple more questions. I'll let you go. You know, I know we skipped over a lot of stuff, but you end up spending a lot of years. I think you were like a staff photographer for Transworld and travel around shooting all types of biggest pros and travel the world. I guess at what point did you kind of make the transition to kind of doing the work you do now? Because I know you're doing like a lot of really amazing like advertising work and lifestyle and all types of different stuff. But what was that kind of transition from being like shooting, skating all the time to kind of doing the type of work you do now, I guess?
It was hell.
It was hell. Yeah. It's
I mean, it was a crazy process.
Yeah.
Like, I didn't realize how little I knew about photography. I mean, I knew a lot about how to shoot a skate photo.
Yeah.
But that doesn't apply to very much of anything.
No.
You know, it was like, yeah, I just sort of wandered around the world of photography before I moved to New York. Not really knowing what I wanted to do. And that feeling, that's a really awful feeling.
Yeah, it's gotta be tough because when you're skateboarding or a skateboard photographer, not that you still aren't, but it's like you're at the top of the chain. Like there was only a handful of guys that were staff photographers and traveling around the world with the best teams and doing all this. So then you kind of almost feel like once you kind of were trying to find your new path, it's like you're starting from square one again, pretty much.
Yeah, from a photography standpoint, yeah, but even more importantly, from a passion standpoint.
Interesting.
Because if you love skateboarding, whether you're a skateboarder or a skateboard photographer or any filmer or anything, like the chances of you finding something else that you like as much as skateboarding are really small.
Yeah.
Because if you had something else that you wanted to be doing outside of skateboarding, you probably wouldn't have gone as far in skateboarding as you did. Because that other thing would have caught some of your attention, I think. Definitely. So I think that's the hardest thing about it, is taking something that you really care about and saying, I'm not gonna do that anymore. like the thing that where you get your entire sense of self from, where people around the world recognize you as this pro skateboarder or
Yep.
photographer or whatever. It's so it's really difficult to say no
Mm.
and just be like, I don't want any of that anymore.
So were you kind of like, was it like were you kind of burnt out on shooting and skating?
Oh yeah. Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Definitely. And if you talk to anybody that I was shooting with in 2003, 2004, they'd probably say, yeah, he was over it.
What what was it that you were kind of burnt out on? Was it like the travel, or just you felt like you were just kind of recreating the same photo over and over again? And what was
Yeah.
it? What did you kind of burn out on?
Yeah, they're definitely creating the same photo over and over again. Uh, but I just wanted to have a bigger voice in the pictures that I was creating.
Yeah.
Like skateboarding is great, but you know, in a lot of ways, you're just sort of documenting what's happening. It's reportage,
Yeah, it's a one-man band.
and you're either there at the right time with a camera or you're not. You know, having a concept that is deeply entrenched in your own sense of communicating a feeling or some sort of eliciting some kind of reaction
Yep.
is almost impossible with skateboarding because you're tethered to these basic rules of showing skateboarding. You know, Dan Sturt, I think, transcended those rules in a lot of ways, which is one of the reasons why I just was in awe of his photography. I was like, man, this guy is like,
Yeah.
the skateboarder is not the most important part of the picture. I mean, that's amazing to think about somebody shooting skateboarding back then and having that perspective. But I think that, you know, being bored of skateboarding and wanting to do other things and not know what it was that you wanted to do is really frustrating.
Yeah.
Like really frustrating, especially when you're just sort of like, while you're having all of these like creative, like, you know, bubbling up creative stuff that you can't identify, you're at the bottom of a staircase with a fisheye.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
Because what type of stuff interests you now? What's kind of got you excited about photography wise? Like what kind of gets you excited, I guess?
I think capturing people in a authentic way and showing in a picture, showing somebody exactly this is just one thing, but you know, it's a big part of it. Showing who somebody truly is in one frame.
Yeah.
Or showing what someone is experiencing emotionally in one frame.
Yeah.
Those are big goals for me. And I think that if you can show somebody with authenticity or capture a moment that if I can capture a moment that makes me feel something when I look at the picture, and then I take that same picture and I show it to somebody else, and they have that same, it elicits the same feeling for them, I'm happy.
Yeah. No, it's awesome, man. It's great.
And that's hard.
Yeah. No, it's really hard. Yeah, it's like the hardest thing. I talked to so many photographers, and it's like trying to find your voice as a photographer is like it's the hardest thing to do, and it's like I feel like it never ends. Like you could shoot one good project and be proud, but then it's just like, all right, well, that was yesterday. Like, what am I gonna do now? It's like
and as you go through it and become more successful, in some ways it becomes more difficult. I'm still really good friends with Jake Rosenberg, and he just did this project. It's a commercial that's coming out in a couple weeks, and I spoke to him about it. He shot it during COVID.
Oh wow!
It was in Florida. I think he was in Florida, and I think he went out there with like two guys, like a DP, and then maybe 2 or 3 guys, and they shot this commercial, and it's unbelievable. It's it's super powerful. And I spoke to him about it. He's like, I cannot tell you how proud I am of this project.
Yep.
And he does tons of stuff. He's tons of work, and his work's amazing. But it's like the thing that he created during COVID when there's all these restrictions and he flies out to Florida with like a shoestring crew,
Yeah.
and you do something like that, that's what feels so great as a someone who tells stories with pictures or with him with film,
Yep.
is being able to be nimble and do exactly what you want to do and leave those tools we were talking about earlier,
Yeah.
leave those things open for like accidents to happen and serendipitous things to happen over here.
Yeah.
And it's hard when it's not COVID and you have 20 people there telling you
Yeah,
what to
man.
do.
This year's been tough, man. Like I don't know about you, but like I just feel lost because like most of my work is portrait based, and it's like, yeah, it's tough, man. It's like you're in this situation where it's like, yeah, there's this virus, and now every day it's like, oh, the numbers are going higher, and it's
Sure.
like it's just a weird scenario to be in because normally I'd be out there like working on some project, trying to photograph some people in their houses or like where they work and all these different things. So it's just been kind of a weird thing to navigate. Like have you been creating much work during this like last 8 months during COVID, or like how you kind of been approach photographing if you have been, I guess?
Not much shooting.
Mm,
I mean, but that's also because of the book.
yeah, true.
Like the book just like
Busy.
literally took over my life.
Dude, I mean, hats off to you, man. Like, as you know, I talked to so many photographers, like you said, people don't realize like it's very expensive to get these things made.
Oh God.
Photographers think like I think a lot of people get the impression that like, you go to some publisher and then they just pay for it, and that's
Oh
just
no.
that's not the case.
Oh, no.
Unless you're
But
like maybe like Annie Leibovitz or some big name or something like that.
yeah,
But it's like, yeah, you're putting tens of thousands of dollars into these things. And I went on, I think the publisher, Goff Books, man, it's on back order, man. So it must be,
yeah.
it
No, no,
must be,
no. I couldn't like literally. I mean, I couldn't be more stoked with
yeah,
how it all turned out. But you're right. It's like you put so much money into something like this. Like
yep,
people maybe don't kind of understand how the whole publishing thing works. Like
yep,
a publisher, if you're someone like me that hasn't done a book before,
yep,
they don't give a shit. They're I mean, I won't say they don't give a shit. They do give a shit, but it's on your dime.
yeah,
And if you pay to play
yep,
and people show up and they like your book, then you start to you have with the publisher, you have somebody in place that is there to get your project as far as they can get it in terms of
yeah,
reach.
yeah. Cause you're not a risk. You're not like a risk.
Not risk
Like
anymore.
it's, yeah,
Yeah,
because they're
risk.
like, oh, you're like, you've proven yourself. And now it's like, all right, you have a market. Cause it's been amazing, man. Like my friends own a skate shop out in Albany, New York called Seasons. And
Yeah, yeah, no,
your book came in the shop, dude. They sold out in like a day or two, man. It just was just like
yeah. Well,
gone.
that was the thing is like, I, over the course of 2 years, it was like a roller coaster. Like
Yeah.
there were points where I was like, oh, dude, this is going to be amazing. This book's going to be so rad. And then like a month later, I was like, in a, like,
I'm gonna go into debt and I'm gonna be fucked.
oh, oh yeah. No one's going to give a shit about this. I just
No.
wasted all my money.
Yeah.
What am I going to do? Like, why am I doing this to myself? And
Yeah.
then it goes up again and you reconnect with the passionate part of it where you're
Yeah.
like, oh, this photo is going to be great. And
Yeah.
this is going to be cool if you put these together or you swap them and you
Yeah.
did it. You go in waves of like depression when you think about the money and all the time they're putting into it.
Yeah.
And then you go into these high points where you're like really feeling the project and what you want to communicate and getting that out there in a clear message.
Yep.
And then you go back down into here and you're like, how am I going to pay rent? And then you go back up here and, you're like, I hope I'll break even.
Yeah, that's the goal. If you can break even, that's a win. That's a win, man.
Dude. And it's crazy when you talk to people that are like, oh yeah, man, your book is killing it, man. You must be making, and I'm like,
No.
I mean, maybe.
Yeah.
I mean, the hope is that, yeah, that's what'll happen. But I think the bigger picture is that if you've done a book once,
Mm-hmm.
you have the tools to do more.
Yep.
And even though the margins are so small and you might not ever make your money back, it's like it's just an amazing project to put your heart into.
Yeah,
because you
man.
just feel it's like, I don't know, it's hard to explain. Like
Just getting to
someone,
see, because like very few people, even myself, man, like I have never done anything like this. Like all the books I've made are like just, those shitty like self-publishing like blurb or all those things. And it's just like it's not the same. Like this is the real deal,
oh,
real
thanks, man.
good paper, good
Yeah,
editing, and this everything involved, man. And it's just like, dude, hats off to you, man.
thank you. And a lot of the credit, it goes to the designer.
Mm-hmm.
His name's Jan Grabowski.
Yep.
He's in Germany.
Yep.
So he's a skater. He's,
Oh, so he
right.
got it. So yeah, that's
Yeah, yeah. Oh, for sure. Like there was times where I was like, I don't even want to do this anymore. It sucks. And he was like, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be good. You know. So it was like, having that is, oh God, it's really important. Also, just because you're like, do I put Guy Mariano over here?
Yeah.
Or I don't know, should I put Kareem here and Jamie here? And sometimes, you're in your head so much, people are like, no, these are good together because
Yeah.
they both rode for whatever company, or
Yeah.
they were friends, or these are spots that are in the same city, or you know what I mean, like little stuff like that only skateboarders know. That
Yep.
was, yeah, that was really
Yeah.
helpful.
Okay. Okay. Last skate question. And I'm gonna let you go. I don't want to take up any
Sure.
more of your time. So my favorite photos in the book, you photographed Tom Penny like at in his pinnacle to me, like that 95 Europe. Like, what were those experiences like? Because like I remember being a kid and you see it in videos, and it was like they had like these contests. I don't know if it was during the summer, but it was like in Europe, and they'd have like all these different contests. But you got to photograph Tom Penny. Like, what do you remember about like photographing him in those like Europe contest days? Because they just seem like so fun.
I mean, you know, that's probably the most common. Uh, people are really fascinated by him, and
Yeah. Yep.
particularly in that, particularly in that era. I think he just sort of appeared.
Yeah.
It wasn't. I mean, I know that he was around before that, but because it was in Europe, we didn't necessarily notice him.
Mm-hmm.
And he just, I think everybody wanted to make skateboarding look easy then.
Yep.
Like people talk about, oh, well, catching your tricks and doing it clean or whatever. Those were the most important things about that era of skateboarding. But I think that making things look easy,
Mm-hmm.
almost like covers that entire, is a sort of like, the umbrella over that entire idea. And I
Yeah.
think he just made stuff look really easy
Yeah.
to the point where people were just kind of like baffled. Like, wait, how did he do? Wait, what?
Yeah, he had like a whole mystique about him. Like I remember being a
Yeah.
kid, they like wrote about him like he was like, I don't know, like this
He's
dude.
like the JD Salinger of
Yeah,
skateboard.
exactly, man. It was just like that. And I mean, I grew up with PJ Ladd. That's who I skated with. I worked at
Oh,
Coliseum Skate
well,
Shop for
yeah.
years, and he's like very similar. Like I've known the kid for over like shit, man, like almost like over 20 years now, and he's still just a mystery to me, man.
Yeah.
There's just like guys that are just like that, and Tom Penny kind of reminds me of the same type of thing.
Yeah. I mean, those Europe contests, um, I think during that time,
Mm-hmm.
contests were strange, because it was like it had just reached the point where the 10-foot quarter pipe that a vert skater could skate in a street contest was
Yeah.
gone.
Yep.
So it was just all street skaters.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that for him, there was, for that era, there was an anti-establishment attitude.
Mm-hmm.
And I think he ripped and he made everything look easy, and he caught his tricks and he was consistent, but he did it all with this sort of like, I don't care attitude.
Yeah. I'm gonna
And I
skate.
think,
I'm gonna skate, get a beer after, smoke a joint, and it's like live my
I
life.
don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
And to hardcore skateboarders that were like pro, that were trying to, land tricks consistently or whatever. He
Yeah.
was like, where the fuck did this guy come from? And to skateboarders who couldn't really skate
Yeah.
and loved the attitude
Yeah.
of fuck the world, and I'm gonna do what I want to do, and I'm not gonna try, and I'm just gonna be. He was that guy too.
Yeah.
Because he was like, I don't care.
Yeah.
Or at least skated like he didn't care.
Yep.
Just
it's like, he'll win the contest and be like, yeah, keep the trophy. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly. A total anti-hero.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love it, man.
I think that he, he had that mystique, you know.
Yeah, no, I loved it, man.
Like, yeah.
No, it was great stuff, man. I just had to ask you about it because that whole Europe contest seemed like a cool thing. Like, I don't know if you guys it seemed like you guys would travel around and go to different contests pretty much during the summers, it looked like.
Yeah, I mean, that one summer, 95, where I got in the van with him, with the Flip and Birdhouse team. So it was like Rune, Tom Penny, Paul Zitzer, Matt Beach, Reynolds.
Wow.
Reynolds and Tom. Wait, who else was with us? Ollie Carnes maybe was with us.
But you had some Bulala stuff with Rune in the book, like Ali Bulala as a young kid.
Yeah, that was 97. 95 was pre-Bulala.
Oh, okay.
And then 97, I think I was in the van with them in Europe again. But yeah, I mean, it was just funny hanging out with Tom. I just remember him like, he was like super stoked on this Police song. Yeah, he was just like, oh, it's the best song ever. I'm going to Skype to this song. It was Spirits in the Material World.
Okay, I'm going to have to play that later.
That old 80s song.
Yep. That's
good. He would just be like, oh, this is fucking best.
That's awesome.
But just stuff like that, like,
yep.
Just, yeah, he didn't speak that much. He didn't, he wasn't like a big talker.
Yep.
But when he did say something, it was either like, it was noteworthy. Whatever he said was noteworthy.
It's like, all right, you got a glimpse into his mind. Well,
yeah,
awesome.
like totally. And just unbelievable.
Well, Pete, man, like I said, big fan of the book. Anybody listening, go check it out. I'll link it. People go to Goff Books, pick up a copy. But what's next for you, man?
Living in San Francisco again.
There you go.
Yeah.
Right on.
And so, I'm going to try to do as many like book things as I can.
Hell yeah.
They're kind of just piggybacked on other shoots that I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I'm going to Miami next week for a shoot.
Yeah, I saw you've been doing book signings at like skate spots and parks and stuff, which is really cool. I like that.
That's honestly, those are honestly like, I was in Chicago because I drove across country.
Yep.
To move.
Okay.
And me and my girlfriend, we just stopped in Chicago. It was like, oh wait, we're gonna go right through Chicago. So we stopped in Chicago for that. And then the one in LA, I was actually on a shoot in LA, and I was like, oh, well, I'll just like stay an extra day and maybe try to sell some books and go to meet up with some. So that's all that this has been. Like the Miami thing too. I'm going to Miami for a shoot, and I'm gonna bring books with me. It's like,
I like it, man. It's just like it's like that real skate attitude, man. Just the way you're approaching it, the skating, it works, man. I love it.
Yeah, that's all I can really
well
do.
Pete, man, I can't thank you enough, man. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And like I said, everybody listening, I'll link to Pete's website and Instagram, and everyone go check out the book. But yeah, thanks so much.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate it.
Yeah, all right. Take care, man. So there you have it. That was the Pete Thompson interview. Just want to thank Pete so much for taking the time to come on the podcast. Like I said, been a big fan of his work since I was a kid, looking at all his amazing skateboard photography on the pages of Transworld and SLAP. So a real pleasure talking to him. And yeah, definitely go pick up a copy of Pete's new book, 93 Till. It's available at goffbooks.com. I'll put the link in the description as well as Pete's website, and you can go order a copy of his book. It was one of my favorite photo books I picked up this year, so can't thank him enough. And as always, I'll be having weekly podcasts every Monday on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, as well as the Photo Banter YouTube page. So definitely go check that out. And as always, thanks so much for listening, and take care.